anywhere.
So, do you want to talk about, a memory or something that connects you with tartan, and what is your truth about tartan?
So I like tartan. I guess it's something which, as growing up as a Scottish person, you are kind of told that tartan is representative of your nation, of your culture, of your identity. But as I grew older, I realised that's all, I guess, tied in also with this kind of myth of nationhood as well, and this kind of branding and actually marketing of our identity. But that's from approaching it with a more kind of, I guess, academic view of it. But from a young age, I do like tartan. My family tartan is the McClellan tartan. That's my mother's mother is McClellan. And so my grandfather's one's Irish and one's English. They don't have tartans, but so I have my grandmother on each side is the two tartans. So my one side is Ogilvy and one side is McClellan, and both of those are not very common tartans. In fact, I think it was my great-great-grandfather who made up the McClellan tartan. So when I see that tartan, that means a lot to me because it's very particular to my family. And the Ogilvy one's just not so popular, and within that there's different types of tartans. You get the hunting tartan, there's different ones, I can't think what they're all called. So yes, I like when I go to a wedding identifying which side of the family people are on by noticing what tartan they're wearing. So like I remember driving up to my cousin's wedding and seeing someone and knowing it was a McDonald tartan that they were wearing. So that's quite interesting because you can identify people's family by what tartan they're wearing. So for instance, all my uncles would wear the Ogilvy tartan, and then my brother has an Ogilvy tartan, which is his grandmother, and then the other side a McClellan. So he can, so you can tell. So that I quite like that aspect. And I really like, my brother loves wearing his kilt at, for instance, a rugby match. And I guess there's that kind of pride of celebrating your nation at rugby matches when it's your country you're playing, a New Year, Hogmanay, or any party, any excuse, he loves wearing it. I think especially wearing your kilt abroad, even if it's just Ireland or in England, there's a lot of pride if you can wear that. I think we get made fun of quite a lot. Oh, you're wearing a skirt, people laugh. Or sometimes you go to fancy dress and they're wearing a kilt because they think it's fancy dress. But for us, there's a lot of pride in it. So although I feel all that pride and I do like it, I also don't like it. I don't like when it's overused. I don't like when it's used in tourism. I don't like when it's used in marketing. I don't like when it's used in carpets and curtains and cushions and all over the place and in branding. I don't like when it's used like that. I don't like when you have a stereotypical image of a Highlander clad in tartan. I don't like the cheap, tacky Stuart tartan. Oh, I shouldn't say that but it's not because of it's not because it's Stuart tartan. I've got a friend Stuart with the surname Stuart, but it's because it's overused. That's the red one you see everywhere, and it's because it's overused. And it's kind of like the what's that? Burberry, is that?
Yes.
Yeah, no, they use tartan. It's overdone. So I don't like that, and I don't like these kind of like teddy bears with tartan.
It loses the meaning.
It loses the meaning, and I don't like people wearing it like in any context where it becomes a costume. I don't like it. So for instance, I was a Highland dancer when I was younger. I would wear a kilt, and a kilt is a piece of clothing. If you wear a kilt with matching socks and a matching jacket and a shirt and everything, blah blah blah, that becomes a costume. If you dress up, as soon as it's worn as a costume, and sometimes you can tell when people look like they're in a costume when they wear these stiff black jackets with all the buckles which don't kind of doesn't fit in with their character. So my brother will put his kilt on with a rugby shirt and walking boots and big socks, and it's not, so it's not a costume, it's a piece of clothing, and that's that. So I like it when it's like that, but I don't like it when it's kind of worn as a costume. In the same way, I got a full-length kilt because at school we had to have a kilt for special occasions, for kind of services in church, and for like prize giving, and the girls wore one to the ground, and the first year just had I don't know where, a tartan, which meant nothing to me. It might not even be anything particular. And the next year I got one which was my family McClellan tartan, and that meant a lot to me to wear. Because if you imagine if everyone was wearing their tartan, like my friend who was Mackenzie had her tartan on, and you know, that was her, you know, it's her clan, it's her family, you know, and it wasn't, it was just worn as a skirt in that sense, the full length, because it's, you know, we're girls, you know, and it's a full length kilt, so it wasn't worn as a costume, it was just worn as something smart to wear. And the boys were the same, and I think if you wear it with a nice tweed jacket or with a kind of woolly jumper, that's how it should be worn to church on Sunday, that kind of thing. I do remember a funny story. My friend Mary, when before prize giving, ironed her kilt, but of course she ironed all the pleats out. So then I was at boarding school, and there was like two of them who worked at the school were like ironing the pleats back into her kilt for how silly was she? That was so silly. But yeah, so yes, I'm not into costume, but I'm not. I think also I feel like that's what I don't like how it's used in North America. I feel like there's the strong sense of wanting to identify with a community, identify with a culture, identify with a nation, and with their own sense of belonging, their own sense of identity. And in countries like America and Canada, where there's melting pot, they are selective in the heritage they want. Well, some of them are selective, some of them are just Scottish or Irish or whatever through and through. But a lot of them will be a bit of a mixture, but they're selecting that they are proud of their Scottish roots. And then they are showing that by having Scottish flags and wearing kilts, and that's because they perhaps don't have the context to go along with their identity. So I am Scottish. I don't need to wear tartan to prove that I'm Scottish. I guess I feel the same thing in Cape Breton. I feel it's nice in a way, I liked it when I went into the church, and I think it was in Mabu, and I went in, and that was one of the few places I've seen the McClellan tartan, which is my family tartan, because so many McClellans left and went to Cape Breton, and they had, in the church, they had 6 pillars, and one of them had McClellan, and I liked that, because that was showing their identity, but I also feel that they're using the tartan to substitute the language. So where they've lost the language, I feel when you walk into the Gaelic college, you just seem to be swarmed with tartan. And I feel like that is a substitute for the fact that although they still have the culture, there's not as many Gaelic speakers. And I think it's a bit the same in Scotland. I do think it is the same in Scotland. To a certain extent, but more so they're wearing their identity in it, and if they do kind of concerts like Broadcove Scottish concert in Cape Breton, you know, even the step dancers will all be wearing bits of tartan, because they're proving that this is their kind of showing that we do all these traditions, and these traditions are Scottish, and we're wearing the tartan to show. Whereas I disagree with all that, and I think I am Scottish because I am Scottish, because I'm Scottish by birth and by culture and by heritage and by ancestry and by upbringing and by culture and everything, you know. So because it's not about, it's just about who you are, isn't it?